A pleasant good day to all my YouTube fans across the world. It's my pleasure once again to stand before you to do another YouTube presentation. So I, Imo Rameses Bakari, your psychologist and life coach. It is my desire to inspire you to rise higher. It is my desire to produce consistently productive videos for your enrichment. It is my desire to educate, to encourage you to become better, and to be with you along the way in terms of creating a more balanced and fair society in which we live. And this will be done through teaching, through research, through lecturing, through motivational speaking, feature addresses, counseling, coaching, mentoring, and community empowerment. And we are prepared to partner with you throughout 2026 and beyond to ensure that these things become a reality. So today, our motivational word for your reflection is to develop your mind on a daily basis. And remember, every interaction, every situation is a learning opportunity. And the key thing is to strive to become better. Having presented you with my motivational word, I would like to remind you of the services that we offer. We offer coaching services, we offer counseling services, we offer classes at the SCA level, CSEC, CAPE, and the university level. We offer developmental courses such as a 4-week public speaking course costing $1,200 for students and $1,800 for students and $1,800 for the general public. We offer a 10-week course entitled The Fundamentals of Psychology costing $3,800, and we also offer another 4-week course entitled Mastering Emotional Intelligence costing $1,800 for students and $2,500 for the general public. So you can give us a call at 1-868-778-5141, 1-868-779-2544, or email us at leadershipwithadifference@gmail.com and avail yourself of any of our offerings. So today, I would like to speak with you on a topic of the moment and a topic of all times. And the title of the topic today is to embrace emancipation with heart, body, and soul. Now, when we think of emancipation, and the last regime in Trinidad and Tobago renamed the day African Emancipation Day, whether you call it African Emancipation Day or you call it Emancipation Day, it is important that we know that the group of people in this universe who was subjected to the most abominable experience of brutality in human history definitely were the African community. So whatever way you term the day, it is of specific importance to the African community across the globe. And I want to emphasize that, but at the same time to broaden the discussion on emancipation a bit. But having said that, we could think of, in terms of the part of the world, in the Caribbean here, in the Americas, all right, in the context of Trinidad and the Caribbean in particular, all right, we know that we had the Emancipation Bill of 1833. It became law in 1834, and there was a 4-year apprenticeship where the ultimate release of chattel slavery took place. So if we use 1838 as the starting point, this year will mark the 188th anniversary of the abolition of chattel slavery in the Caribbean. So, having said that, there's some other basic points that were just mentioned. And it's important to mention it because the debate is spiraling in all different directions in Trinidad and Tobago. And whilst emancipation is of specific concern to the African community, and that must always be noted, when we talk of emancipation, we would like to also include all people of conscience. And having said that, I was part of an organization as an executive member of the National Joint Action Committee, which was very pivotal in promoting emancipation. And it did that at a time when very few organizations were focused on that. And we promoted not only emancipation, but we also promoted Indian Arrival Day. And the reason for doing that was that, all segments of the community, is important that they have an appreciation of their part of development in the country, valuing their heritage, acclaiming their heritage. But it must never be done at the expense of demeaning any other group or putting one group above the other. So hence the reason from the fundamental position of NJAC's philosophy from its inception, African and Indians Unite. However, I'm mentioning all of that to make the point and to cite the words of my former leader, the now deceased Makanda Daga. And it reads as follows. History has taught us that emancipation is not distinctly national or racial, but it is a continuing process that involves all men and women of conscience. When we commemorate emancipation, we are not just celebrating a victory over man's inhumanity to man, but we are also giving meaning to life itself. Makanda Daga, former political leader of NJAC. Now that statement is a very profound statement. It is profound to the extent that when we have the various conversations on emancipation, we don't get this kind of philosophical and practical insights. So as I said in the beginning, every African in the world where emancipation is concerned must never ever forget what their ancestors went through. Because what your ancestors went through is what has allowed us to exist today. So whatever you have achieved in life, whether you become a teacher, a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, a surveyor, a gardener, whatever, an outstanding sportsman, you name it, it rests on the sacrifices, it rests on the many lives that were lost, and it rests on the struggles waged, whether it's, the Haitian Revolution, which, lit the spark and encouraged our ancestors across the Caribbean to fight for their freedom. It definitely wasn't because of the work of abolitionists. As Eric Williams argued, slavery became economically, not viable, and our people fundamentally fought for their freedom. So if they didn't fight, we would not have had the chance to live and to contribute to the development of our society. That is why it is just not only of historical significance in the African community, it is also of spiritual significance. And I would like to reiterate the words of another former deputy leader of NJAC, Mother Ayahura Ome, in one of his magazines when he said that, for Emancipation Day, everybody can do something. So you can say a prayer. If that's your way of remembering and venerating the sacrifices of your ancestors, say a prayer. You can fast. You can light a candle. You can beat a drum. You can organize an activity. And of course, you must say thanks. You must say thanks for their efforts that have allowed you to be a contributor in life. And you must appreciate that, as one Dr. Anthony Plowder said, any group of people that does not remember their past is not deserving of self-respect. So if you want to be considered as a self-respecting person, you cannot ever forget the struggles, the mahafa, the most abominable experience of mankind that your people went through. As the great Dr. Frantz Fanon said, he said it is unnatural not to love your own. And he described it as a mental pathology. We have to do all in our power to repair that situation. And we could first of all start it by acknowledging who we are. And there's a lot of confusion as to who we are in this part of the world. If you were born in Trinidad and Tobago, whether you are Indian, African, Chinese, Caucasian, or whatever, you are nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, meaning your nationality. In the social sciences, race is described as a social construct, meaning how people look and their features. They have a portion, naming them racially, whether it's African, Chinese, and also the part of the world that they came from, China, India, Africa, etc. So a person could be of a different race, of different ethnicities, and because of where they were born, they may be nationals of various countries of Africa, nationals of Canada, nationals of United States of America, wherever. Now, if you take Nigeria as an example, there are millions of African people, over 250 million persons live in Nigeria, who generally look the same, but they belong to different ethnicities. As we know, an ethnic group will share common culture, history, experience, etc. So you may belong to the same race, but you may be of a different ethnicity. For example, you will have the Yoruba tribe, you have the Igbo tribe, you have the Fulani, Inshan, and a host of other groups, just to illustrate the point. So every national in a country, you owe it as a responsibility, regardless of your race or ethnicity, to work in the development, for the development of that country. And that is why one of the rallying cries of NJAC from its inception was that African and Indian should unite, being the major groups in Trinidad and Tobago. Because a small country as Trinidad and Tobago of 1.5 million people, if people cannot unite and work constructively, there is no hope for the development of Trinidad and Tobago. Any leader of any persuasion that is promoting any form of divisions is not a leader worth his or her salt, and they must be discouraged and they must be called out if such behavior exists. And whether it comes from a leader or a normal citizen, in the same way, it must be called out and discouraged, because the development of Trinidad and Tobago will not manifest itself to its fullest potential with such small-mindedness. So that is why I read the statement of my former leader, Makandal Daga, because what it says is that whilst emancipation is of spiritual and historical significance to the African community, whatever race you belong to, once you have a sense of conscience and you have a sense of opposing injustice, you too must play a part in standing up for anything that limits the human potential. That's why he said that all people of conscience must ensure that no other group must ever be subjected to any such form of barbarity ever again in history. So, in recent times in Trinidad and Tobago, there has been a whole set of debate about Indian performances within the Emancipation, and there's a whole set of debate around it. But everything must have a philosophy, and everything must have a context. Where emancipation is concerned, the full extent of things African must be on show. However, if the context for our performance from the Indian community is in solidarity and is to lend support to what their brothers went through, what the ancestors of the African community went through, that is understandable. But everything must be put in context. But emancipation is too serious a process to be cheapened by cheap politicking and a lack of deep understanding of how significant it is for humanity. All men and women of conscience must fight against the wrongs in society, the injustices in society, and things that run counter to the development of their societies. And they can draw inspiration from what the African community and the ancestors went through. And if you draw inspiration in that, you too, regardless of how you look, can become a fighter for the full liberation of the people of the world and the parts of the world where you exist. So, emancipation must be embraced and it must be celebrated with full vigor. However, what your ancestors went through mustn't make you bitter, it must make you better. Emancipation is not a platform for people to be promoting division and hate. That is counterproductive, that is foolish, and it doesn't reflect a sense of liberation. When you have a full appreciation of yourself, when the appreciation of all groups in society is promoted, then it will lead to greater harmony. It must be a process, it must be encouraged, and it mustn't be forced and imposed on anyone in terms of that process unfolding. But we need to be grounded in a proper appreciation of our past, our national past, our ancestral past. It is all important. I'm a lecturer at the University of the Southern Caribbean, and there's a very important course there in the social science department called Race and Ethnic Relations. I was talking to a former student just last week, and I was mentioning, I do not hear that course being mentioned much. And that course should be a flag-bearing course in all schools in Trinidad and Tobago because of the nature of our society. Every group needs to have a full appreciation of who they are in terms of their ancestral evolution over time. And that understanding must now come together in mass with all groups having that appreciation, because first of all, that love for self must be profound. And if that love for self is not profound, if you cannot define yourself, cannot make the distinction between being a national of the country, belonging to a particular race, belonging to a particular ethnic group, and knowing that your role that you're supposed to play, there will be mass confusion that is evident in many ways in the society today. So, as the great late Stalin said, he said, sufferers don't care about race. Sufferers only care where the next meal coming from. And today in Trinidad and Tobago, regardless of how people look, according to a report I heard just last night on the CN3 News, between December 2025 and March 2026, as many as 6,000 persons have been out of jobs. And whether you're an economist or not, as you move around the country, you can practically see how slow it is, you know. Taxis take longer to fill, groceries are not overflowing at the mountain as they used to be, you know. You hear complaints coming from the business community. There has been a report that due to certain closures in Point Lisas, as much as 10,000 US in terms of foreign exchange has been removed from the economy. So it is, you know, palpably clear of how slow the economy has become. And whether you're African, whether you're Indian, and particularly those at the lower end of the ladder, you know, we are feeling the weight of the economic strain. And we need to pull together, we need to have mutual respect of the cultural and historical heritage of all groups in the country. That is fundamental. And all groups must have a love for their heritage. Anytime you remove yourself from your heritage, well, you have become an alien in this part of the world. And an alien will always have a difficulty in navigating new terrain. So ground yourself in terms of your understanding of your past, your ancestral past, culturally, historically, spiritually. And then when you have that grounding, when you have that appreciation, it will put you in a better position to work with any group, because the salvation and the best development of Trinidad and Tobago resides with everybody putting their heads together, having pride in their ethnic identity, having pride in their cultural identity, and working for the betterment of Trinidad and Tobago. So I remind you as I end this presentation, embrace emancipation with heart, body, and soul. And it's a daily process. It must continue. You must play a part and become better citizens, more productive citizens, but not bitter at any cost. Thank you for listening and thank you for viewing. And remember, give us a call at 1-868-778-5141, 1-868-779-2544, or email us at leadershipwithadifference@gmail.com. So thank you for listening and viewing, and stay tuned for another powerful presentation next week.